Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna everyone. Today we are reading chapter 14, text 20. Chapter titled as the three modes of material nature. Text 20. Guṇān eta atītya trīn. Dehī deha-samudbhavān. janma-mṛtyu-jarā-duḥkhair. Vimukto amṛtam aśnute. Guṇān, qualities. Etān, all these. Atītya, transcending. Trīn, three. Dehī, the embodied. Deha, the body. Samudbhavān, produced of. Janma, of birth. Mṛtyu, death. Jara, and old age. Duḥkhaiḥ, the distresses. Vimuktaḥ, being freed from. amṛtam, nectar. Aśnute, he enjoys. Translation, purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation. When the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, old age and their distresses and can enjoy nectar even in this life. Purport. How can one stay in transcendental position even in this body in full Krishna consciousness is explained in this verse. The Sanskrit word dehī means embodied. Although one is within this material body, by his advancement in spiritual knowledge, he can be free from the influence of the modes of nature. He can enjoy the happiness of spiritual life even in this body, because after leaving this body, he is certainly going to the spiritual sky. But even in this body, he can enjoy spiritual happiness. In other words, devotional service in Krishna consciousness is a sign of liberation from material entanglement. And this will be explained in the 18th chapter. When one is freed from the influence of the modes of material nature, he enters into devotional service. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. I beg for blessings from all the assembled Vaishnavas so that I will have some intelligence to present whatever I have learned. And without your blessings, I won't be able to do any service for you as well as for Srila Prabhupada. So today we are reading from the three modes of material nature. So when the three modes of material nature is one of the main subjects of Bhagavad-Gita. In Bhagavad-Gita there are 5 subject matters that are primarily covered over the Bhagavad-Gita and they are discussed. One is the Ishvara, the Supreme Lord. Second is the Jiva, the living entity. And the Prakriti, the three modes of material nature. Kala, which is the time. And then Karma, the fruitive activities. And out of these 5, Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti and Kala, they are eternal. Only Karma can be changed. Karma is temporary and it is a temporary account. And Prakriti, although it is eternal, at times it's manifested, at times it's unmanifested, according to the will of the Lord. So in this particular chapter, Krishna is talking more on, he's explaining how the Prakriti, how does it work, how does it affect the living entity. So this particular chapter falls into the Jnana section of the Bhagavad-Gita. So Bhagavad-Gita is again divided into 3 sections: karma, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and jnana yoga. So the jnana Krishna is presenting here is to not to become impersonalist, but it is to help someone to become a bhakti yogi. It is to help someone to become a devotee, because we need to use our intelligence in performing our devotional life. It is not out of sentiment or out of blind belief, but it is out of intelligence. So Krishna is telling how is that you have to use your intelligence. So here we see in this particular verse a very prominent word, dehī deha-samudbhavān. So dehī means embodied and deha means body. So there is a difference between dehī and deha. Dehī means one who has occupied the deha. Like a person who is renting a flat. He is just going into the flat for renting, but that flat doesn't belong to him. So there is a difference between the apartment and the renting person. Similarly, there is a difference between the living entity and the living entity acquiring the material body. And now Krishna is saying one can transcend these modes of material nature even being in this body. And they can become free from birth, death, old age and distresses, and they can enjoy the nectar even in this life. And we see in the 19th verse, Krishna says, if someone understands that the modes of material nature is actually in work, is actually the doer, and he knows me, and I am transcendental to these modes, then he will come to me and he will attain the spiritual nature. And this is after if a living entity leaves the body and then they go to the spiritual world. But here Krishna is saying, even you being present in your material body itself, you can actually experience the spiritual nature. Now Prabhupada also emphasis on the same word, dehī, embodied. So Prabhupada is saying that although one is within this material body, by his advancement in spiritual knowledge, he can be free from the influence of the modes of nature. And then he can enjoy the spiritual life even in this body, because after leaving this body, he is certainly going to the spiritual sky. But even in this body, he can enjoy the spiritual happiness. This is a very... this glorifies actually the bhakti, the process of the bhakti. Because you see, if someone performs karma kanda, or what are they doing? They are doing presently they are engaged in certain kind of ritualistic activities so that they get fruits after this life. So after this life they can go to the heavenly planets and they can enjoy in the heavenly planets. Or when we take jnana yoga, purely jnana yoga, nothing to do with bhakti. What are they trying to do? They want to end the miseries of this life. So they are focusing on the Brahman aspect of the God realization. And by their fruit, when their practice gets mature, in the next life, when they leave this body, they will attain the Brahman. But here, bhakti is, after you leave the body, at your maturity, you will go to spiritual world. And while performing bhakti, you will experience spiritual happiness. So this glorifies how bhakti is very special. And this chapter we see, it is divided into 3 sections. The first 9 verses of this chapter talks about the conditioning of the modes. How the modes are conditioning every living entity, how they come into existence, and how they're binding. It is a mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance. And the next 9 verses, 10 to the 18, they define the characteristics. What are the characteristics? How do we identify these modes are present on a particular living entity? And their actions. If the living entity is performing a certain kind of actions, how we can identify these modes are present. And also the death. If someone dies in a particular mode, what will be their destination? And the last 9 verses, starting from 19 to 27, the section is all talking about transcending the modes. So Krishna is telling, although these modes are very difficult to cross over, but there is a process how we can cross over. So as I said, this particular chapter falls into the Jnana Yoga. What should this knowledge of this understanding the 3 modes should do to us? We have to understand this. Just knowing, okay, the modes are acting on us is not enough. But what should be our application by knowing that the modes are affecting us? It will help us to discriminate. It will help us to discriminate that we are dehī but not the deha. A discrimination that I am the living entity, I am not this body, I am the spirit soul, and there is Krishna, the Supreme Master. And if I come into his surrender and if I follow the path what he is prescribing to us, then I will become free from these modes. This is the application of the jnana. Not just by knowing is not enough. And Prabhupada also says in the first verse of this chapter, 14.1, Prabhupada says, one has to do philosophical speculation. So why is Prabhupada calling us to do a philosophical speculation? That means use your intelligence. You study all the philosophy of these 3 modes and understand where are you located. Where is that you have to apply the corrections and where is that you have to lead yourself to. And as we were talking about the jnana, in the Bhagavatam 3.23.56, it is said, Na nehayat karma dharmya na viragya kalpate na atītya pada sevyaya jivam api mṛtyohi saha. Anyone whose work is not to elevate himself to religious life, anyone who does the work, it should elevate someone to practicing religious life. And their religious ritualistic performances should lead one to renunciation. And their renunciation should lead someone to devotional life, to the Supreme Personality of God. If they don't lead in this way, even though someone might be living, but they're considered to be dead. So even though we are using our intelligence to understand, this should lead us to renunciation and this should lead us to the devotional service to Krishna. This is the essence of having this chapter in the Jnana section. And then, now after hearing, the Arjuna will be asking in the 21st verse, saying that what are the symptoms, how is one behaves, how do we identify someone has transcended the modes? Because he wants to know, is there any person, such a person existing, who actually is able to transcend the modes even in this lifetime. And then Krishna talks about in the next coming verses from 22 to 25, he gives the characteristics and the symptoms. But in 14.26, he gives the actual key, how to transcend the modes of material nature. Mam cho vyabhicharena bhakti-yogena sevate sagunan samayatyente brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and then thus comes to the level of Brahman. So what is the criteria for someone to transcend the modes of material nature even in this lifetime? That they have to be engaged in full devotional service in all circumstances. No matter, some days are good days and some days are bad days, but we have to keep continuing in our devotional service. And that kind of devotional service will help us to go beyond these modes. Why? Because the modes of material nature means, it is in Sanskrit it is called guna. These are the gunas which are also called as qualities, or in other sense they are also called as ropes. So they are actually binding the living entity with different qualities. So the living entity is not able to transcend beyond those modes because of the qualities they are binded to. But devotional service, being on the transcendental platform, it is cutting the ropes. So Prabhupada gives a very nice example in the Srimad Bhagavatam that a person who is bound, he cannot free himself. But the person who is free can free the person who is bound. So we should always take help from such a person who is free from these bindings. And who is that person? He is the expert spiritual master. Because he knows how to engage a living entity in devotional service so that they can transcend these modes of material nature. Otherwise, it's not possible, because they can train us and they help us to engage in devotional service. What happens when someone engages in devotional service? This bhav of Ishvara, that I am the enjoyer, I am the controller, is removed by the devotional service. But we are putting the servant, I am the servant of Krishna. By doing so, we are coming into under the control of Krishna. Because the modes of material nature also work under Krishna. They are also the energy of Krishna. Krishna says in 7.14, Daiviyesha gunamayi mama maya durattaya mama eva ye prapatyante mayam etam tarantite. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. So he himself is saying, it's very difficult to overcome by yourself. But those who have surrendered onto me can easily cross over it. So he is telling the difficulty of the situation, and also he is offering a solution for the problem. Why? Why is it difficult? What is this material nature doing to the living entity? Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. The spirit soul is getting bewildered by the influence of these modes of nature, because this energy is very, very strong and it's divine. It is Krishna's energy. So it is actually influencing the living entity, and the living entity is bewildered. He is losing his intelligence, and he is coming under the influence of false ego, and he is thinking that I am actually the body. I am actually the doer of the activities. But actually, he is not the doer of the activities. The activities are carried out by the modes of material nature. And these are pertain only to the body. So the actions, what we perform, is actually carried by the subtle and gross body. But as a spirit soul, we have nothing to do with the material nature. But we think we are. An example also we can think of is, say for example, a living entity is placed in a pig's body, hog's body. The identification is so deep that it thinks it's a pig. Or a living entity is placed in a woman's body, and the living entity thinks that she is woman. Or the living entity is placed in a tree form. It thinks that it is tree. It is not that the false ego acts only at the human form of life. The moment we want to be separated from Krishna, we don't want to engage in devotional service, the moment we want to enjoy, the moment we came to the material world, that is the time we got ahankara, the false ego. And that false ego is acting on the living entity, and that is leading in every species of life. And there is often said the story in the Bhagavatam classes. Once somehow the Indra got punished and cursed that he was cursed to become a pig. So he came, I don't know where he went, but anyways, he had a pig family and he was very happy. And then he left all his management duties in the Indraloka and he came here and he was enjoying with his pig family. Then Brahma understood, okay, let me go and enlighten him. So Brahma comes and he tells him, you're not the pig, you're the Indra, you're the chief of the demigods and you have managerial duties to do. Then Indra says, no, I am the pig. I am the husband pig and I have a wife pig and I have so many piglets, I have to take care of them. Indra says, no, you're not the pig, you are actually Indra. He says, no, I can't come with you. I am the pig, I am the master of this family. Then of course, Brahmaji enlightens him and then he realizes his position and then he leaves. So it is very difficult. It is very difficult for the living entity to understand that we are not the body. But Krishna, that's why he is using, you're the dehī but not the deha. You have occupied the body but you're not the body. And this body is also gifted by the material nature. According to your inclinations, according to your past activities, under the supervision of the Lord. And in the 13th chapter, we see 13, 21 and 22. Just 1 second, I want to read this one. Karya karanam kartavye hetu prakriti uchyate purusha sukha dukkhanam bhoktver hetu uchyate. So here Krishna says, nature is said to be the cause of material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. So it is a very difficult statement to understand what is the difference, but Prabhupada gives a very beautiful purport for it. I will read the purport so that we will understand from Prabhupada's words only. The different manifestations of body and senses among the living entities are due to material nature. There are 8,400,000 different species of lives, and these varieties are creation of the material nature. They arise from different sense pleasures of the living entity who does desire to live in that body or that. When he is put into different bodies, he enjoys different kinds of happiness and distress. So if someone gets a material body, automatically there is certain amount of happiness and distress designated for that body. No one can remove that quota of that happiness and distress. It is there. So what does it mean? The material nature is awarding to your body. But once you accept the body, once you are forced, it's not even accepting, you're forced to take that body because of your karma, you're accepting the sufferings and the whatever so-called little happiness in that body. And then Prabhupada continues, his material happiness and distress are due to his body, not to himself as he is. In his original state, there is no doubt of enjoyment. Therefore, that is his real state. Because of the desire to lord it over material nature, he is in the material world. So Prabhupada is saying, why someone is in the material world? Because someone wants to enjoy the material world. Someone wants to have a separate position as a controller and enjoyer, and they want to be far away from Krishna. So that's why they're in this material world. But as a living entity, you can't do that. So Krishna has facilitated this material universe in such a way that once the living entity comes here, he is covered over. And he is given such a body, just a makeover, so that the living entity can try its best in this futile attempt to be happy, to be enjoyer and to be controller. But Krishna didn't leave the living entity there. He comes back from time to time and he gives the spiritual knowledge and he makes us awake. You tried in 8.4 million species of life. You're not happy. Understand that you are not the deha, but you are the dehī. Why? Because the living entity eternally it wants to be happy. It is full of Sachidananda. And we go down, and according to one's desires and activities, material nature places one in various residential quarters. Thus, being himself is the cause of attaining such residential quarters, his attendant enjoying or suffering, one placed in some particular kind of body, he comes under the control of nature because the body being matter acts according to the laws of nature. At that time, the living entity has no power to change the law. Suppose an entity is put into the body of a dog. As soon as he is put into the body of a dog, he must act like a dog. He has no choice. It is forced upon him. He cannot act otherwise. And if the living entity is put into the body of a hog, then he is forced to eat stool and act like a hog. Similarly, if the living entity is put into the body of a demigod, he must act according to the body. This is the law of nature. So when we study the modes of material nature, we see the stringency of the modes. How are they pushing and forcing upon us? When we understand, using our intelligence, when we can discriminate this, then we will appreciate how beautiful is bhakti life, how important is for the living entity to take up to the devotional life. And then in the 1322, still further Krishna goes, Purusha prakriti stohi bhungte prakriti jan guna karanam guna sangasyo sad asad yoni janmasu. He says the living entity in the material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. That means, according to his inclinations, he is placed into the bodies of mode of goodness, mode of passion, mode of ignorance. And we have read in the fifth shloka of this chapter that there is always a competition between goodness, passion and ignorance. So sometimes the living entity might get a body of combination of goodness and passion, or only goodness, passion and ignorance, or only ignorance, or only passion. So based on the body it acquired from the modes of material nature, it will enjoy. It will enjoy. This is due to the association with the material nature. Thus he meets the good and evil among the various species. And here also Prabhupada in the purport, he says very beautiful points. This verse is very important for us, for an understanding how living entities transmigrate from one body to another. It is explained in the second chapter that the living entity is transmigrating from one body to another just as one changes the dress. This change of dress is due to attachment to material existence. So we are clinging on to the material existence that we want to enjoy here. That is pushing us to acquire more and more material bodies. As long as he is captivated by this false manifestation, he has to continue transmigrating from one body to another. Due to his desire to lord it over material nature, he is put into undesirable circumstances. Like Krishna explains, what are the undesirable circumstances? Janma-mṛtyu-jarā-duḥkhair. No one wants to suffer. No one wants to die. No one wants to have diseases. No one wants to have distresses. But they are forced upon us. What is an example? The COVID situation. It's been dragging on for last 18 months. Who can stop? It's forced upon us. We are not able to control it. Even though there is vaccination, still people are getting affected. So we have to see how the material nature is very, very strong, very, very forceful. Under the influence of the material desire, the living entity is born sometimes as demigod, sometimes as man, sometimes as a beast, as a bird, as a worm, an aquatic, as a saintly man, as a buck. This is going on. And in all cases, the living entity thinks himself to be the master of his circumstances. Yet he is under the influence of the material nature. So we have to understand what is our position, how much we are bewildered. And then Prabhupada says, one has to rise, therefore, above the three modes and become situated in the transcendental position. That is called Krishna consciousness. Unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his material consciousness will oblige him to transform from one body to another because he has material desires since time immemorial. So the conception has to change. And that change can be effected only by hearing from authoritative sources. So, and we see the effect of devotional service. When we engage in devotional service, these modes doesn't affect us. I was thinking of an example of Prahlad Maharaj. You know, he's a Mahabhagavat, but on other hand, he's just a 5-year-old boy. He was put into so much trouble by his own father. He was put into boiling oil, or he was almost crushed by the elephants. He was given poison. He was thrown from a hill. So much misery, so much harm, so much pain. But he was so steady. He never changed because he was always protected by the Lord. Because he has transcended the modes by engaging himself in the devotional service. When Hiranyakashipu calls for Prahlad and he says, "What did you learn in the school?" Then he says that, "Oh, best of the demons, demon kings, you're the best of the demon kings. I will give you an advice. You better go to the forest of Vrindavan and perform bhakti there. Don't get rotted in this material household life." So he really gets upset. How dare this child is advising me? And then he calls Prahlad's teachers, the materialistic teachers, Sanda and Namarka, and he tells them, "You train this boy nicely." And then after some time, again, Prahlad comes back to the kingdom. And then this time, his mother decorates him. And then father cares for him. And he puts him on the lap of his lap. And then he kisses him. And then he again asks, "What did you learn in the school?" Then Prahlad says, "Shravanam kirtanam Vishnu, smaranam padasevanam, achanam vandanam dasyam, sakyam atmanivedanam. Iti pumsarpita Vishnu, bhaktischan navalakshana, kriyate bhagavate adya, tanmai adityam uttamam." So he says, hearing and chanting about transcendental holy name, form, qualities, paraphernalia and pastimes of Lord Vishnu, remembering them, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, offering Lord respectable worship with 16 types of paraphernalia, offering prayers to the Lord, becoming his servant, considering the Lord as one's best friend and surrendering everything onto him with mind, body and words. These 9 processes are accepted as pure devotional service. One who has dedicated his life to service of Krishna through these 9 methods should be understood to be the most learned person, for he has acquired complete knowledge. So how is Prahlad defining what is knowledge? He is defining one who knows these 9 processes of devotional life and who is able to apply. Such a person is called learned person. Such a person is considered to have the complete knowledge. This is the definition of the knowledge that Prahlad is telling. And afterwards, as we know, then Hiranyakashipu throws Prahlad from his lap, and then, Nrsimhadev comes and he kills Hiranyakashipu, and Lord Nrsimha was raging in anger. And all the demigods has offered prayers, but his rage was not pacified. Lord Brahma and Narada Muni pushes Prahlad, saying that you go and pacify the Lord, because the Lord has come to protect you. It is only for you he has taken this incarnation. And then Prahlad comes and he offers many, many beautiful prayers. And in one of the prayer, in the beginning of his prayers, he says that, how is that I am born in the demonic family and I am in the mode of ignorance? How can I offer prayers and you will be satisfied? Whereas the demigods, they are born in mode of goodness, right? If someone is in mode of goodness, after that, according to Bhagavad-Gita, what Krishna says, they will get Janaloka, Tapaloka and higher planetary positions. So they are offering prayers and you are not getting pacified. I am born in demonic family and I am always with passion and ignorance. How will my prayers pacify you? But only his prayers pacified the Lord. Why? Because he was in pure devotion. He was offering devotion from his heart. That itself shows an example how, even though he is in the material body acquired, but still because of his devotional service, he has become transcendental. And he was qualified to become a pure bhakta. He's one of the Mahajans, right? That one, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu always hears the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj. And Prabhupada was also emphasizing that one has to hear these pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj. And then we see, and then Prahlad Maharaj says that, and Nrsimhadev says, okay, ask for some material benedictions. I will grant you anything what you say, whatever you ask. But then Prahlad says, no, don't bewilder me, don't tempt me with these illusions. If you really want to give me something, you give me service to my spiritual master, because of whom I came into devotional life, because of whom I understood you. And he gives a very nice example. Spiritual master is like an expert geologist who understands where is the gold and what is the process to extract the gold. So similarly, a spiritually advanced person, he knows in the body there is the spiritual particle, but they are identifying in a wrong way. So I have to engage them in such a way that they will come back to Krishna. They will appreciate devotional service. And if we put this in the context of ISKCON itself, how Prabhupada has designed this whole ISKCON, whether it's the morning program, whether it's the activities, the devotional activities, what we perform, they are not even on the mode of goodness, but they are on the transcendental mode. Right? Even as the sadhakas, we experience a lot of joy when we perform devotional service. And Krishna here, he's saying that vimukto amṛtam aśnute. One can taste the nectar. And if we are not having, if we don't have that experience of joy, we wouldn't push forward in our devotional life year after year. And this is the expertise of the spiritual master. It is the expertise of Srila Prabhupada, who has designed that reading books for 2 hours a day, attending the morning program, chanting 16 rounds, engaging in various devotional services, whether it's cleaning or cooking or deity worship or book distribution or Harinam Sankirtan. It is all part of, or raising a Krishna conscious family. That is also. This is all the devotional services, but the center is Krishna. And he knows how to engage each and every living entity. I want to read one more quote. An expert mineralogist or geologist can understand where there is gold and can then invest his money to dig there and chemically separate gold from the ore. An expert spiritualist can understand where the soul is within the matter. One who has not been trained cannot distinguish between gold and stone. Similarly, fools and rascals who have not learned from an expert spiritual master what is soul and what is matter cannot understand the existence of soul within the body. To understand such knowledge, one must be trained in mystic yoga system or finally in the bhakti-yoga system. As stated in Bhagavad-Gita 1855, bhaktyamam abhijananti. Unless one takes the shelter of the bhakti-yoga process, one cannot understand the existence of the soul within the body. So just merry reading is not just enough, but merry reading plus application according to the spiritual master's instruction would help us even to transcend these modes. And here in this verse there is another important point that Krishna points out to. What is the problem with this material world? It is all the time we are afflicted by janma-mṛtyu-jarā-duḥkhair. So the living entity is going in the cycle of birth and death. This is referred as bhava-roga because this disease has no cure. It seems to look like it has no cure, but this has a cure. That is called bhava-aushadhi. So what is the cure? What is that which can stop or cut off this cycle of birth and death? If anyone willingly or unwillingly hears Krishna Katha, the disease of birth and death will certainly stop. And therefore Krishna Katha is called Bhava Aushadhi, the remedy to stop the repetition of birth and death. And from whom should we hear? Here Sukadeva Goswami is highlighting whom should we hear and what happens when we hear in that association. This is from Bhagavatam 10.1.4. Nivritatashya rupagiyamanat bhavau sado chotra manobhiramat gautama shloka guṇānuvadat pumam virajet vina pasugnat. Glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is performed in the parampara system. That is, it is conveyed from the spiritual master to a disciple. Such glorification is relished by those who no longer interested in false temporary glorification of the cosmic manifestations. Descriptions of the Lord are the right medicine for the conditioned soul undergoing repeated birth and death. Therefore, who will cease hearing such glorification of the Lord? Except a butcher or one who is killing his own self. Although one cannot kill himself, but if one is not engaged in devotional service, they're eternally into time immemorial, they're casted into this material existence and into various material bodies. So the mechanism of this illusion, how it is acting on us, is important for us to understand, because this is also spiritual potency of the Lord. But the remedy is sarvopadhi vinirmuktam tarpatrena nirmalam rishikena rishikesa sevanam bhakti ruchyati. When someone engages giving up all the material designations, but just as I am the servant of this Rishikesha to please the senses of the Lord, then they will have the fruit of, going back to Godhead. And even in this life, one can experience that nectar. And Prabhupada gives a very nice example how this can be seen in our own lives. Prabhupada says, we actually see that even young boys and girls in Krishna conscious movement have given up their long practice of bad habits like illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication and gambling. Because Krishna consciousness is so potent that it gives them full satisfaction, they are no longer interested in material sense gratification. So if we analyze here according to the description of the mode of passion, That means it is the attraction between man and woman. That is falling into the illicit sex, right? Or meat eating, intoxication and gambling. That is falling into the mode of ignorance. So someone who is practicing Krishna consciousness, practically we have seen that they have given up those modes. And they have transcended from those modes and they came back, they are situated at the mode of goodness. And the more pure devotional service we can perform, we can even transcend this mode of goodness. So I end here. We have discussed about dehī and deha, and then we have discussed about how the modes are acting upon us. We have seen the example of Prahlad Maharaj and his prayers, and how the devotional service is the epitome or beautiful to perform. Any questions or comments or corrections? We will. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
You were giving the example of Indra. So we are also so much attached in this material world.
Yes.
We cannot give up if somebody is dying, our relative, our family, mother or father. So we are so much attached, we don't want to leave them. And even they don't want to leave us. We give them very best meditation so that they can survive and they can live. So this is the human nature we have, that everyone, according to the person, they are attached to the everything. They cannot think that I have to go back. Even a devotee, he sees that how I can survive. He doesn't think, okay, let me die. Just like Purusham Prabhu, he thought, let me die. Everybody is not like that. And just recently now they've taken a Prabhu had left his body 3 hours before. So he died his natural death. So when a person is sick, he wants to go to the hospital and see that how he is sick. Prabhupada gave the example that you have to die, you have to just chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. If we follow the instruction of Prabhupada and understand, then leaving the body doesn't bother us. Right?
Is it a comment or question? Comment. Can I add something to it, Prabhu? So, self-preservation is not a wrong thing. It is recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam that one has to do this self-preservation. If someone is sick, they have to take care of it. Why? Because they will have the opportunity to become more Krishna conscious. We are the spirit souls, but we are also having this human experience. So that is not to be ruled out. But as you said, the emphasis should be more on the spiritual life. But I think from person to person, it will take time to come to that realization and understanding and application. It's just an added point only. Yeah.
When we are listening every day to the Gita and Bhagavatam, so we should meditate on that one. Just like Parishad Maharaj.
Yes.
Within 7 days he wanted to die. He accepted that within 7 days I have to die. He never protested. That many people told him that you can protest, you can be saved, but he said, no, if God wants me, so leave the body, I will leave.
Yes.
And within that 7 days he received Bhagavatam. So similar way, we should also be listening every day. We are listening Bhagavatam and Bhagavad-Gita. And if we meditate on those things, and then we will not feel that living body is difficult for us.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
The class was wonderful. The class was full of knowledge. But it is very difficult to dehī and their separation.
Yes. But yes, Prabhu, like Krishna is not saying that you should act only on. Krishna is telling that you engage in devotional service. By doing devotional service, it will help us. Even I also identify with my body. I don't know, understanding is different, or practicing to that level is different. But what is the hope for the sadhakas? That by engaging slowly, we will give up these material designations which are very deep rooted in our consciousness. That every time when we do the service that I am Krishna's servant, maybe it will help us. Not maybe, it will help us. That is the injunction of what Krishna is saying. So this is what we have to be performed. That's why I said, Prabhupada made it super easy. That you just come, chant, eat, and dance, and just, and enjoy. This is what he's saying. He's not saying that you always meditate, that you are not the body, you're just the spirit soul. But the process will help us to transcend. Thank you, Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
This text translation, see this, where the eminent being is able to transcend these three modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, and old age, and their distresses, and can enjoy nectar in his life.
Yes.
In the last sentence of this Prabhupada purport, when one is freed from the confines of the modes of nature, he enters into the devotional service.
Yes. For this,
Just like we are talking devotional in deep actually, but here it is starting actually. So where the devotee enters in devotional service, he is free from three modes of nature.
right.
This Prabhupada, this is the answer I think. The answer of this text is in the last line.
Yes, yes. But I was also thinking, because Prabhupada, Krishna says, right, when someone comes to Brahmabhuta platform, that is the time when actually the devotional service starts.
Yes,
But
that is the status one who realizes one actually. Realization.
yes, yes.
That is the realization. Who Krishna Atma.
Nasut,
You see that this the 18th chapter 54 actually.
yes.
It is very difficult to understand. Like this. This one who is thus. This thus word is very much important and is coming from the previous text. Right? This
Yes.
previous text is being qualified by the intelligence and controlling the mind and all these things actually. Then he will transcend situated at once rises the supreme Brahma. This is the relation of Brahma, and that is the transcendent to the three modes of material. Both are separate actually. This is the advanced thing actually. This is the advanced stage of devotional service.
Yes,
And
yes.
that is the initial stage actually. How to transcend the modes of material nature, if Prabhupada clearly said actually, when one is engaged initially, when he enters into devotional service,
Yes,
he
yes.
is immediately transcend the modes of material nature.
Yes.
And second thing is that one who is engaged in devotion by chance or by the mercy of Lord, by the previous karmas actually, and he immediately transcends the modes of material. I can tell you the story of myself actually. Once actually, I was just walking on the road actually, the wind started blowing actually. What was the actually? I found that lot of papers were just lying actually. A piece of paper just struck on my foot actually. I picked up that piece of paper and it was a newspaper. Editorial notes. It was written in that actually, the piece of paper. The Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. And a lot of things were there. Then my mind is struck. Oh, it's very important. That's why we celebrate this the janma-mṛtyu-jarā-duḥkhair. I must go to the Vrindavan. Immediately I got my ticket from the Vrindavan to this Mathura, and during my whole journey, I was not knowing even a single thing, but only know that we can chant only Radha Krishna. The whole 2 hours actual journey, I chanted this Radha Krishna, Radha Krishna, Radha Krishna, only these things. And the Lord made actually all the arrangement here to come here.
Yeah.
This is totally correct. I entered just actually when I read that actually word. And the Lord made all the arrangement.
Yes, yes.
I never faced any difficulty.
Yes.
I never approached anybody else to tell me anything, but the devotees came to me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, Prabhu has something. We should quickly finish.
One very simple formula for transcending the modes of nature is given by Lord Krishna in Gita. That is, udasinamatasinam guṇān saguṇān samatitya etān brahma-bhūya. Udasinamatasinam. We have to see the modes of nature, but not to angling.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. We'll finish here if you don't mind.